One day, the world came to an end. The pandemic covered the planet like a heavy blanket. People stayed at home, the streets were empty, social media was filled with news of the sick, and masks became mandatory outdoors. The war began suddenly. Explosions woke the city in the middle of the night, and very soon the news feeds were full of reports of losses. The economic crisis followed, and then, quite naturally, hunger appeared. Store shelves were empty, people learned to survive on minimal supplies. But it was not humanity that hammered the final nail into the coffin. Fantasy-like creatures appeared and the world was completely plunged into chaos. What happened after their appearance is quite easy to predict. Just like in the novels, superhumans appeared who had awakened incredible abilities. However, there was one thing that distinguished reality from the fantasy world. Superhumans were not strong enough to stop the apocalypse. The hero reaches out, using his fingertips to pull out some chips from the package. The world has not yet gone to pieces, although it is already close to it. That's why he now lives more or less normally. But there is also something that oppresses this guy. He is completely alone, and there is no one around. Now he is the only one living in this 100-square-meter apartment. His mother, father, grandfather, and grandmother are all somewhere outside. The boy's father bought the place with a loan of 200 million won, and about the same amount was taken from the family's general budget. The reason the young man started living there is because before the family can get a tax refund on the purchase of this apartment, someone has to live in it for 2 years. The guy looks at the glowing screen of his phone with frustration. He found himself trapped here immediately after the apocalypse began, without any communication. The smartphone screen flashes another notification about no network. The guy sighs in frustration, getting ready to put the now useless gadget aside. But suddenly his attention is attracted by some noise outside the window. He suddenly throws his head up and sees a huge monster flying straight towards his window. The monster flies right up to the glass and opens its huge mouth wide, revealing dozens of razor-sharp fangs. Frightened, the young man helplessly covers his face with his hands, mentally saying goodbye to life. The monster roars loudly, and the air flow from this scream causes the window glass to rattle dangerously. The guy screams again in fear, his voice hoarse from horror and panic. But a few seconds pass, and for some reason the monster still doesn't break the window and fly into the apartment. The boy hesitantly opens his eyes and sees a notification in the game window, which states that this monster has been denied entry. The hero exhales deeply, finally remembering that no one can enter his apartment without permission. He is slightly bent over, breathing loudly, and trying to calm his racing heart. The guy is still alive only thanks to this system. Once again, he approaches the front door and pulls the handle, not losing hope of leaving the apartment. But again, nothing happens, and, enraged, the young man kicks the ill-fated door with all his might. No matter how hard he tries, getting out of here seems almost impossible. Finally, the guy kicks the door one more time and returns back to the room. This is already the 3rd day since the world met its end. And thanks to this system, he is still alive, but locked in his own apartment with no way to escape. Absolute recluse can't leave the house. A new notification pops up, and the guy clenches his teeth in anger and helplessness. He is terribly angry that he can do absolutely nothing in this situation. Moreover, the more time passes, the more problems he has. The food that was in the apartment was almost gone. And yesterday the electricity was cut off, which is why the refrigerator stopped working. The guy survived only on the supplies from it, but they would not last long. He only had a few packages of instant noodles left. The young man is distracted from his sad thoughts by a new notification. The system reports that the owner has killed a level 23 Calican, for which he receives a large amount of experience and increases his skill level. Not understanding what is happening, the guy goes to the window again. He looks out into the street and sees several goblins devouring the body of the very monster that crashed into his window. The young man begins to think that he got the points for the kill because the monster died from hitting his house. The system notifies you that a new skill has been acquired and that nearby loot meets the requirements. The stunned guy reads that the prey calculation begins, and at the same second the monsters raise their heads and stare at him. The monsters look at him angrily with a loud growl, and the young man cannot understand what is happening. He is again informed that the counting of the loot has been completed, and more than 2 million won have entered the wallet of the absolute recluse. Suddenly the light that was previously turned off comes on. The guy realizes that for reasons unknown to him, the electricity has returned. The system suggests that half of the house's functions will be restored in order to preserve the dignity of the owner. The house declaration reaches the 3rd level. A joyful smile appears on his face, and the guy can't hold it back. Finally coming out of his stupor, he rushes to the refrigerator. The guy opens the door and sees that the equipment is now working too. He rushes to the water tap and turns the valve, making sure that there is now water in the apartment too. Still hesitant, he quickly runs to the stove, presses the power button, and the panel obediently lights up. The recluse still cannot believe his good fortune, although he does not fully understand how it happened. But now everything in the house works the same way as before the end of the world. The guy reaches for the phone with hope. But to his disappointment, there is still no network and the gadget remains useless. The recluse clutches his head in frustration. He looks around and another thing comes into his field of vision. There is a small flash drive lying among the papers and other trash on the floor. Without thinking twice, the guy picks it up and sits down at the computer. This flash drive contains photographs of himself and his parents, starting from his childhood. With tears in his eyes, the boy looks at his younger self, tightly holding the hand of one of his parents. In the next photo, he is already a few years older, but still looks just as happy. The last photo was taken very recently, on his last birthday. The recluse frowns in disappointment and closes the folder with photographs. He exhales heavily through his teeth, holding back unwanted tears. The young man decides to bring his family here, no matter what the cost. With these thoughts, he resolutely gets up from his chair. The guy doesn't yet know what exactly he'll do, but he intends to make every possible effort. Suddenly, he hears the notification sound again. The system shows him the 1st level store, where he can now create lists and purchase the goods he needs for a certain price. He thinks for a second, but still decides to see what kind of items are in this store. Therefore, the recluse stretches his hand forward and touches the desired icon with his finger. Since this store shows how much money is available, it means it is definitely linked to the wallet that the system previously reported. Having clicked on the store, the guy hopefully goes to the window again. But even though his skill level has increased a little, he still can't leave this house. However, he knows one thing for sure. If he hunts monsters, he will be able to increase his level even more and get a couple of new skills. And so on until he knocks out the skill that will allow him to get out. But how to destroy these monsters is still unclear. There is virtually no chance that the situation with the monster crashing into the window will happen again. The boy looks down thoughtfully, watching as the goblins continue to tear the body of the dead monster into pieces. He can definitely kill them. The recluse grabs a bottle of water and returns to the window again. With a good swing, he throws the bottle down. Hope returns to the boy's heart when he realizes that he is able to throw objects outside the apartment. So he immediately decides to take advantage of this opportunity and bends down to get a small dumbbell. With a joyful smile, he squeezes her hand tightly, finally feeling like he can do something. But the happy smile quickly disappears from his face when he looks back out at the street. Several more goblins approach the goblins standing below and gesticulating wildly, call them somewhere. Having grabbed the remains of the prey, the monsters are about to leave. "Don't go," the guy shouts at the monsters, but they of course don't hear him. Then he takes a deep breath and swings. With all his might, the guy throws a dumbbell straight after the retreating monsters. And unexpectedly, even for himself, his projectile hits the target, smashing the head of one of the goblins. Now the guy is sure that he is finished. All he had left was another dumbbell exactly the same. The guy doesn't think there's anything else in the house that can kill even one goblin. He simply doesn't have the physical strength to throw a TV or a computer. Meanwhile, the goblins, realizing what had happened, began to scream loudly. Quite quickly, the monsters realize where exactly this dumbbell came from and look up. The guy understands that now he has definitely been noticed. The goblins talk loudly in their own language, keeping their eyes on the man in the window. As if on command, all the monsters suddenly take off and run straight towards the house from where the dumbbell came. The recluse is scared at first, but eventually comes to the conclusion that it is not so bad. At such a close distance, it will be much easier to hit the monsters with something. The guy stretches his hand forward, presses the desired icon, and opens the store. The system window again shows him the cash balance and offers to open the list of goods. The recluse decides to take advantage of this offer and clicks on the icon, still holding the dumbbell in his hands. "Would you like to add this item to your list?" the system asks. The guy agrees, and the system begins scanning the dumbbell. Now the classic 3 kilogram dumbbell with a non-slip coating has been added to the list. The recluse sees that it costs exactly the same as in the regular online store where it was purchased. With interest, he presses the buy button and waits. A second later, a dumbbell exactly like his materializes next to him. "It works!" the joyful guy cries out. Now he has a chance to carry out his plans. Without thinking twice, the guy throws the dumbbell he just bought out of the window. And again, the projectile hits the target right on target, slicing open the head of one of the approaching goblins. The recluse killed a level 7 goblin and received experience and 3,345 won for it. Meanwhile, the goblins run up to their fallen comrade, but they can no longer help him. Immediately after the first dumbbell, the second one is already flying in their direction. The third monsters are no longer going to wait and run away in all directions. Damn, the guy swears. He has already bought 3 sets of classic non-slip 3 kilogram dumbbells and intends to use them all. The recluse grabs one of them and swings again, hoping to throw it further this time. He succeeds, and the projectile hits one of the goblins right in the face. After this hit, the skill level increases again and a new skill appears. This time it's an alternate dimension used to store items. The guy decides to use it right away. To test the new skill, he places one of the dumbbells inside. And then he takes it back out, happy that it all really works. The summoned dumbbell materializes right in his hand. Now the recluse can summon items from the vault to any location he needs. A bloodthirsty smile slowly spreads across his face. "Open the vault," the guy commands. He stretches his hand forward again and concentrates. "Summon the dumbbell! Summon the dumbbell!" The recluse's voice echoes through the room, repeating this phrase over and over. Now several dumbbells materialize in the air right above the goblins gathered there. Such speed leaves the monsters no chance of escape. Once the goblins were dealt with, the recluse decided to add a few more important items to the vault. In total, there were about 10 items, including all kinds of food products and everyday necessities. After some time, the guy noticed that several won were missing from his wallet. He begins to wonder where this money could have gone. Electricity, gas, and water bills immediately come to mind. Therefore, the recluse decides that the money was written off specifically to pay all these bills. This means that the money will go away much faster than he expected. After the recluse hunted the goblins, they immediately fled and abandoned their former home. Since then, he has only managed to kill a couple of monsters. The guy looks out the window, hoping to see at least one lost monster, but only the head of the very first Calican is lying on the ground. So, we'll have to look for another way. The recluse looks up, hoping that sooner or later some stupid Calican might fly past. The guy's eyes immediately widen in surprise. He can't believe his own luck. There really is a huge monster rushing straight towards him. The recluse cries out and mentally thanks all the gods. With lightning speed, he turns around and runs deeper into the room. There he finds a small mirror and a ladder. Having tied the mirror to a stepladder, he drags part of it out into the street. The guy's calculation turns out to be correct, and the sun is reflected in a bright glare in the small mirror. Noticing this bright glow, the monster turns its head towards the light. The monster immediately notices a man in one of the windows. With a loud growl, the Calican turns and flies not past, but straight towards the recluse. Now all the young man can do is wait. It worked. He rejoiced, calmly standing in place and waiting for the monster to approach. Meanwhile, the monster had already flown up to the window and opened its huge mouth wide, revealing impressively sharp fangs. The recluse thinks that at this rate, he will soon gain the necessary experience and skills. If he manages to kill this creature, then it is very likely that the level will rise significantly. The monster still continues to hover in front of the window, flapping its huge wings widely. The air from these swings practically knocks the guy off his feet. He covers himself with his hands, trying to see at least something with his watery eyes. The recluse expected the monster to crash into the window and die, but something went completely wrong. He looks outside and sees the Calican, unharmed and clinging to the wall of the house with its claws. The monster looks calmly straight at him, opening its mouth wide again, from which saliva begins to drip. A small bead of sweat trickles down the recluse's temple from the tension. Meanwhile, the monster impatiently taps the glass with its huge beak, trying to break it. The sounds of the blows are deafening and make the guy's heart beat faster from fear. The system warns that an unauthorized entity is attempting to enter. The recluse hopes that the monster will not succeed in doing this. He needs to try to do something, so the guy opens a store. From what he had observed so far, loot counting only occurred if the corpse of a defeated monster was somewhere nearby. The goblin hunt was not successful for this very reason. Some survivors took the corpses of their fallen comrades with them when they left, and they were not counted as loot. In other words, if the distance exceeds a certain limit, loot counting does not occur. The recluse cannot allow the same thing to happen to this Calican. This monster needs to be killed with one blow, and the guy suddenly understands how it can be done. He buys 10 bottles of canola oil at once at the store. Before the monster flies away, the guy quickly grabs them and runs to the stove. There he takes out a saucepan and places it on the hob. Without wasting any precious seconds, he immediately begins pouring the purchased oil into it. Having poured everything out, he turns on the stove. Then the guy assembles something resembling a torch from improvised means and dips the resulting object into hot oil. Immediately after this, he hurriedly asks the system to open the store, and pours the remaining oil from the pan straight into it. Having finished, the recluse finds a lighter and takes it in his hands. With a slight grin, he lights a fire and holds it to the makeshift torch. The torch lights up instantly, and the young man has to move it aside a little to avoid getting burned. He returns to the window, and luckily for him, the monster is still there. The young man carefully watches the movements of the Calican, choosing the right moment. "Call of canola oil," he finally cries out. A system window immediately appears above the monster, who was not expecting such meanness, from which hot oil is poured onto him. The monster roars in pain as the recluse watches, waiting for the oil to cover most of its body. And when this happens, he leans out of the window as far as possible and swings the torch. Luckily for him, the recluse manages to hit the monster right away. The fire engulfs the body of the loudly roaring Calican in a matter of seconds. It worked, the guy's happy. Meanwhile, the monster is already losing consciousness from pain and heat. Almost immediately, the monster falls down like a heavy stone. The recluse stands motionless at the window, watching his flight. Calican screams loudly with the last of his strength, but he can no longer escape the scorching fire. Time seems to drag on forever, but eventually the monster's eyes finally go out and it dies. The loot counting begins. After the calculation, almost 10 million won was deposited into the recluse's account. Before the guy even has time to be surprised by such a huge sum, the house, by order of the system, suddenly begins to expand. The recluse cries out in surprise, looking around in panic. Something strange starts to happen around him, and the young man can't figure out what it is. He freezes in place, unable to move. Suddenly his body is twisted by an attack of unusual and incomprehensible pain. It seems that the entire space around has been plunged into darkness. And in the midst of this darkness, the guy suddenly begins to see some kind of corridor. He mentally walks through these doors and sees a family sitting at a small coffee table. People? The guy thinks, dumbfounded. He thinks that these are the neighbors from the apartment nearby. The guy clutches his head in another attack of pain. The people he now sees in front of him for some reason look confused and frightened. The recluse cannot understand why he is observing them now. Gradually, the darkness begins to dissipate. The guy tries to collect his thoughts and get rid of the slight dizziness. The system shows him one of those people, Choi Hyun-jun, whose age has already crossed the 30-year mark. Next to him, he sees Park Hae-won, the man's wife. Their first child is 6-year-old Choi Na-yeon. And the last thing he sees is the family's 3-year-old daughter, Choi So-yeon. The system notifies that creatures have been discovered that meet the requirements for citizenship status and offers to grant them citizenship. If this is not done, all these people will be driven out of their homes. This means that they will all become easy targets for monsters. So the guy decides to grant citizenship to these people. Most likely, he will now also be able to acquire new skills related to citizenship. And the first skill is Absolute Eyes, thanks to which nothing in this house will be hidden from the owner's gaze. The young man decides to see what else might be related to citizenship. He sees that only 4 positions out of 600 are occupied by citizens, and this number greatly surprises the guy. He can look at the characteristics of each of his citizens. The recluse understands that with the help of these people he can become even stronger. Going even deeper, the guy sees that he can even give some kind of quest to his citizens. At his own discretion, he can assign both a reward and punishment, including death. At first, the guy decides to commission the citizens to kill the goblins, but then cancels the request. He understands that if he wants, he can kill his citizens at any time. Now it's in his power. But what to do next is still not very clear. Out of curiosity, the recluse decides to try using the Absolute Eyes skill. And as soon as he clicks on the right icon, everything around him changes. "I see everything," the shocked guy whispers quietly. Moreover, he not only sees but also hears everything that happens in his house. He watches as a quarrel between spouses escalates. This family has run out of water and Hyunjun wants to go and get some, but his wife is categorically against it. Hyunjun planned to go to the nearest store because it was quite large and there should definitely be water there. Haewon doesn't want to let her husband go on such a dangerous expedition, but the children are crying for water and she has no choice. The husband begins to persuade her even more strongly and promises that he will definitely return and bring something. "You trust me, right?" he asks, his voice pleading. Haewon realizes that her children will die of hunger and thirst if she doesn't let her husband go to the store. The recluse commands the system to dispel the Absolute Eyes skill. The situation is much worse than he thought. The guy thinks it would be nice if more items could be added to the store. To his delight, he finds a menu where he can upgrade the store, storage, and dignity. The recluse decides not to delay, and immediately spend the points he earned earlier on improvements. The shop skill level is now 2, the number of items in the list has been increased to 20, and a 10% discount has been applied to the prices of all items. There are still 2 points left, and the recluse decides to invest them back into the store and into preserving his dignity. The store can now hold up to 40 items, and a feature has been added that can restore old items and turn them into new ones. So, upgrading the store level was definitely worth it. The guy opens the store again, but this time to buy water and tangerines. If he provides his neighbors with electricity and water, he can ask for a lot in return. The guy increases the level of the Maintaining Dignity skill, and now he can register vassals. Meanwhile, Hyunjun is already heading for the door, a backpack on his shoulders, and a golf club tightly clutched in his hand. Haewon hugs her children and looks sadly after her husband, hoping that everything will end well and he will return back to them. The man leans over to the children and asks them to protect the house until he returns. The girls look at their father with tears in their eyes, not wanting to let him go. The father tells them that they must definitely go get water and food, and gently ruffles their hair in an attempt to calm them down. But there are monsters outside. One of the daughters finally bursts into loud cries. She remembers very well how it all happened that day when they were playing calmly on the playground. Horrible monsters appeared out of nowhere and ran straight towards them. The frightened girls jumped up from their seats and tried to run away from them. They ran as fast as they could, trying not to look back. Then they were lucky that their parents were nearby and immediately picked them up in their arms. If it weren't for mom and dad, the girls would hardly have been able to escape from the terrible monsters. Hyunjun frowns as those memories come back to him too. Both girls are already crying uncontrollably, and no matter how hard their mother tries to calm them down, all her efforts are useless. Hyunjun sadly thinks that this may be the last time he sees his family. But there is no choice, and one of them must go in search of food. Suddenly the door handle starts moving, as if someone is pulling it from the other side. The whole family turns to the door at the same moment, freezing in horror. Hyunjun grips the handle of the stick tighter in his hands, ready to protect his family to the last. "Excuse me, open the door please." A voice suddenly comes from behind the door. Hyunjun is relieved to realize that it is the voice of a human and not a monster. However, this could also be some kind of monster that can talk like a human. That's why the man remains silent, frantically trying to decide what to do. Meanwhile, there is silence behind the door. "He's gone?" Hyunjun whispers quietly under his breath. The man approaches the door cautiously to listen, if there is any movement behind it. But suddenly the door swings open and the room is filled with bright light. Hyunjun immediately rushes towards the family, shielding them with his body. The man screams loudly in panic, begging them not to touch his family. But his scream suddenly dies down when he hears a human voice behind him again. He looks around and sees a young guy who doesn't look like a monster at all. "Who are you?" the man asks, his voice trembling from the fear he's experienced. The recluse replies that his name is Kim Jae-hyun and he lives next door. The guy continues that he has water and tangerines with him and suggests talking after the whole family has eaten. Hyunjun turns to the guy, not believing his ears. Hae-won continues to hug the children, afraid to trust a stranger so quickly.
You can feel it in the floor, boys. Hey. Listen. You were lying in the front row, saying you believed in everything I paid, sharing secrets in the back door, smoke, helping at the promises we made. But when you stormed and tore my branches, you were ghosting fixes in the sun, breaking through my downfall with their glasses, calling what we had just for fun. Fake friends fade, like vapor in the morning, clear as the light. I see their shame. I was breaking while they tossed it to the story, using my crafts to carve their names. But my heart keeps turning pain into a chorus. I rise again from every flame. Let the fire burn the mask right off their faces. I'm rock out king from the embers of my name, from the embers of my name. I've been wrestling with the mirror, asking, was it Lee who wore the lie? Did I barter all my boundaries just to keep a handful by my side? They were cheering when I stumbled, calling my confession just again. But I found a quiet kindness in forgiving who I was back in. For faith and sped, like vapor in the morning, clear as the light. I see their shade. I was breaking while they toasted to the story, using my cracks to carve their lamb from the embers.
The head of the family bows politely to Jae-hyun, thinking to himself that perhaps this man could really help them. "Please come in," he says politely, making way. They walk up to the table and both girls look at Jae-hyun with expressions of utter horror. The recluse thinks to himself that it seems he scared them too much. He looks around and notices curtains that block out light, which is very smart. This really reduces the chance of monster attacks. The first thing Jae-hyun decides to do is turn on the light. He lifts his head up and his eyes light up bright blue. The family looks around in surprise. Jae-hyun hands Hyunjun a bottle of water and asks him to give the children a drink before they continue. The man immediately gives each of the girls a whole bottle. The thirsty children empty the bottles in seconds. So Yeon drinks so quickly and greedily that she ends up choking and coughing. Jae-hyun looks at her a little surprised, his eyes clearly showing pity for these little frightened girls. He hands So-yeon a tangerine, smiling warmly. With apprehension, the girl still accepts the gift. Hae-won, knowing that she can't handle it on her own, takes the tangerine from the girl to peel it. The girl manages to do this in less than a minute and hands her daughter the first slice. The woman puts a tangerine slice into her mouth as So Yeon looks at her eagerly. It seems that over the past few days of the apocalypse, the child has already forgotten even the taste of fruit. Having eaten a slice of tangerine, the girl smiles happily, pressing her palms to her cheeks. "Is it delicious?" the mother asks with a warm smile, and the child nods vigorously. Next in line is Na Yeon, fidgeting impatiently next to her sister. The girl also gets her slice of tangerine and breaks into a happy smile. The recluse is presented with numerous notifications about the increased trust these citizens have in him. The system suggests that Na Yeon has met all the requirements to be registered as a vassal. But unfortunately, she is still too small. Unlike ordinary citizens, Jae Hyun can only register 10 vassals. They must be at least at Hyunjun's level and be able to follow orders. But this particular man's trust is still too low to become a vassal. Jae Hyun's thoughts are interrupted by Hyunjun, who wants to at least thank the kind stranger. The man doesn't know how he could repay such kindness. The recluse invites him to come out and talk about it. Hyunjun is a little tense, but still agrees, and they go out into the corridor. Before starting the conversation, Jae Hyun is silent for a few seconds, and awkwardness practically hangs in the air. Finally, he asks if Hyunjun and his family have received citizenship. The man replies that yes, they all saw such a notification window about half an hour ago. After receiving it, the whole family couldn't even move for some time. From these words, the recluse understands that all these people were frozen until he agreed to register them. Jae Hyun makes a decision. He will help this family return to the life they had before the apocalypse. Hyunjun, hearing this, asks again in shock. The recluse promises him that he can make it so that monsters cannot invade their home. It just seems impossible. But Jae Hyun is confident in his words. Hyunjun immediately realizes that it is not free and asks what he will need to do. The recluse warns the man that he could lose his life if he agrees. Hyunjun decides that he would have to go for water and food anyway, which is also very dangerous. He put his life on the line when he was about to go and get water for the girls. Suddenly, Jae Hyun asks the man how much his golf club cost. The man is surprised by the unexpected question, but still names the amount. It becomes clear to the recluse that this is too expensive to add to the list. Hyunjun tries to find out why this question was asked, but the guy just waves it off. "Do you remember the day the monsters appeared?" he asks again. The confused man replies that it happened over the weekend. Their appearance was truly terrifying. Jae Hyun thinks that those people who stayed at home probably managed to survive. One goblin does not have too much power. Its level is even lower than that of the average adult male. The real strength of these freaks is that they move in groups, but the same can be said about people. Jae Hyun decides that he needs to raise his own army. That's why he needs Mr. Choi. The recluse invites him to search for survivors with him. After talking a little more, they go back to their apartments, and very soon darkness falls over the city. Hyunjun's trust has grown significantly since their first meeting. Jae Hyun hopes that he will eventually be able to meet his family if he continues to slowly accept people and move forward. A loud scream interrupts his thoughts. Jumping out of bed, the young man rushes to the window. He looks down and can't believe what he sees. Before his eyes, several people fearlessly engage in battle with the goblins. Jae Hyun is upset that it will be difficult for him to help them. These goblins look very angry and hungry. Their mouths are wide open and caustic saliva drips from their sharp fangs. But it seems that people are not at all afraid of this, and they decisively rush into the attack. The recluse watches this battle with interest, trying not to miss a single detail, and therefore immediately notices something strange. One of the people deals the goblin just one blow, from which the monster suddenly flies back several meters. "What the hell?" Jae Hyun screams. Another girl suddenly takes out a bow, and every arrow fired from it reaches its target. These arrows never miss, hitting the angry monsters right in the head every time. Another man stands calmly on the ground, with a baton slung over his shoulder. Suddenly, he jumps high into the air and lands on the shocked goblins. His club smashes the monster's head almost to smithereens in just one blow. Finally realizing their situation, the goblins scatter and run away from the danger. People remain in their places, and it seems that there is not a scratch on any of them. Suddenly, the girl with the bow listens to something and gets into a fighting stance again. In a second, the weapon is ready for combat again. But she immediately understands that there is no danger, and the sound she heard was the sound of an object falling from some window. Realizing this, she turns towards the house and immediately notices something strange on the top floor. Jae-hyun waves his hand at her with all his might. The girl looks up in surprise, squinting slightly to make out the strange man. Meanwhile, the recluse is waving both hands at once, using all his strength to do so. And at this time, Hyunjun comes to him. The slightly tense man is holding some kind of box in his hands. Jae-hyun opens the door for him and asks him to come inside. Hyunjun blushes awkwardly and thanks politely. He tries to enter the apartment, but suddenly he is stopped by a previously invisible barrier. The man freezes in surprise, not understanding what strange thing he has stumbled upon. The system suggests that unqualified people cannot enter the house. The recluse looks closely at the unexpected obstacle. Could it be that no one will ever be able to enter his apartment? Or only those registered as vassals can enter? Hyunjun decides to simply hand the box over to the guy straight away. He put there everything that could be used as a weapon. The recluse looks into this box and is quite satisfied with what he sees. He asks the system to provide him with 5 bottles of water and the same number of packs of ramen. A stunned Hyunjun watches as food and water materialize out of thin air in front of him. The recluse asks him to go and put the box with all this at the entrance to the first floor. Hyunjun fears that it might be too dangerous. Jae-hyun reassures him, as he has long since realized through observation that goblins are only active during the day. And now he needs to somehow attract those people outside to his side. They will have no choice but to come to him when they realize there is food here. So he once again insistently asks Hyunjun to deliver this box. He is confident that it is completely safe. Hyunjun is still a little hesitant, but still agrees to help. He bows politely and gets ready to leave. Thank you. Jae-hyun smiles gratefully at him. He must definitely do something for such a good person. So the guy quickly creates a task in the system, after completing which Hyunjun will receive some experience. He explains to the surprised man that this is something like leveling up in the game, and for each level raised, he will be given a reward. This gives Hyunjung a little more strength and motivation. He heads towards the stairs, but still feels a little tense, afraid of meeting one of the monsters. Trying to step as quietly as possible, he slowly descends the stairs. Finally, the man comes outside and goes down onto the porch. He just needs to leave this box here and go. Just in case, the man covers himself with his stick to feel at least a little calmer. In the darkness not far from him, he suddenly notices several vague silhouettes. Images of goblins about to devour him immediately begin to appear in the man's head. We need to run, he panics. And he almost starts to run away, when suddenly he trips over something under his feet. With a loud cry, he falls and hits the ground. The man tries to force himself to move, but his body does not obey at all, and he remains lying in place. Behind him, he can already hear someone's footsteps. Already preparing for the worst, he covers his face with his hands in horror. But suddenly he hears human voices. "Are you okay?" one of the strangers asks him. After some time, Jae-hyun receives a notification that an unauthorized creature is trying to enter the house. He immediately begins to worry about Hyunjun, whom he himself sent out into the street. To dispel doubts and find out who is breaking into his door, the recluse again uses the Absolute Eyes skill. Each time it becomes easier for him to use this ability. Almost immediately, the guy sees Hyunjun and those same people from the street walking with him. They are just discussing that their rations are running low and new food would be very welcome. The recluse dispels the skill and regains normal vision. The system immediately offers him to register these people as his citizens. In the process of expanding his territory, he could forcibly grant citizenship to those who were there, but for some reason outsiders were given a choice. This means that if they wanted to, they could easily reject his offer. What should I do? Jae-hyun thinks in panic. And then suddenly a small TV on the wall picks up some signal and starts making a sound similar to a telephone ringing. Jae-hyun doesn't immediately understand what it is. He takes the call and Hyunjun appears on the screen. His voice sounds too quiet, and the recluse increases the volume by a few notches. Meanwhile, the system offers to edit the task, and the guy immediately agrees. This is his chance to turn things to his advantage. So he edits the quest, and now Hyunjun needs to treat the new guest to ramen. Hyunjun sees the updated mission and seems to like it. Jae-hyun asks the man to give the strangers food first, and he promises to do everything in the best possible way. With a polite smile, the man conveys the recluse's words to them, and the people agree. A delighted Hyunjun returns to the system window and informs the guy of their agreement. As soon as they finish the conversation, the recluse immediately asks the system to offer citizenship to his new acquaintances. Now the right of access to the 30th floor is given to people from the street. This means that all these people accepted Jae-hyun's proposal, which is good news. Now the number of citizens has increased to 10 people, and the experience and money they earn has increased by 10%. Jae-hyun can't get enough of such impressive bonuses. He is ready to welcome all these people with open arms. Thanks to the system, he sees the true level of power of his new citizens, and immediately notices that Dong-gun has already reached level 23, which is equal to the power of the Calican, whom the recluse himself recently killed. As expected, this Dong-gun is a superhuman, and his awakened ability is baseball throwing. Depending on who is throwing the baseball, this item can be a good weapon. Dong-gun's skill increases the throwing power by 3 times, which is enough to destroy any monster. As for trust, Jae-hyun plans to simply increase it slowly. The guy sets the experience distribution coefficient for all 6 of them to 70%. Now all that's left is to give them monster hunting quests, and the recluse himself can simply sit back and earn experience and money without putting in any effort. When the time comes, it is imperative to get to know all these people better, because they may be the key to his reunification with his family. Suddenly, a notification appears that Citizen Dong-gun's trust has increased. Immediately afterwards, several more identical notifications appear, but about other citizens. After some time, Hyunjun brings new friends to his apartment. His worried wife meets him at the door, but he asks the girl to cook some food and promises to explain everything to her a little later. She's not entirely happy about it, but her husband is sure Jae-hyun has some kind of plan, so she needs to help him. The girl thinks for a second, weighing the pros and cons, but still decides to help. She asks the new arrivals to wait a little, and they bow gratefully, agreeing. Dong-gun looks around carefully, studying the situation. He decides to ask Hyunjun what kind of person this Jae-hyun is. But to his regret, his new friend knows nothing about this guy, except that he is their neighbor. This makes Dong-gun think. Jae-hyun seems like quite an intriguing person to him. If everything in this apartment appeared thanks to this guy, then he is definitely a superhuman. He must have amazing abilities to create all these benefits. So Dong-gun decides that he must make a good impression on this man. After all, Jae-hyun is the one who is powerful enough to provide electricity, food, and water. In the modern world, this is simply an incredible miracle. Cooking will take some time, so Hyunjun suggests that the guests take a shower. The eyes of all the girls in this company immediately light up with delight. They didn't immediately think that since there was electricity, they could use most of the amenities. This means there is also hot water, which they all lacked so much. This part of Jae-hyun's abilities brings girls into indescribable delight. Hyunjun explains that there is a bathroom in both the living room and the bedroom, so 2 people can wash at the same time. The rest of the guys at this time begin to discuss the possibility that this Jae-hyun is also a superhuman like them. One of the guys wanted to suggest giving this Jae-hyun a good beating, but Dong-gun stopped him, suggesting instead that they make a good impression. He asks his friend to do nothing and just remain silent when they finally meet this person. Now their goal is to get as much food and water as possible. So Dong-gun asks the others not to screw up and to explore this room thoroughly. The guys immediately agree. Their leader always suggests the right things, so they decide not to argue with him this time either. Only one of the guys stands silently nearby, not taking part in this conversation. Dong-gun will immediately notice his dejected and upset appearance. Ben-ho? He approaches the boy and puts his hand on his shoulder, supporting and encouraging him. Dong-gun says he's very sorry that everything turned out this way. If he hadn't invited them all to the housewarming party then, maybe everything would have turned out differently. Ben-ho tries to calm him down and pretends that everything is okay. Dong-gun suggests that they all grab a bite to eat and then go to Ben-ho's grandmother's together. The guy looks down, barely holding back tears. He thinks to himself that it is probably already too late. There is almost no chance that the helpless elderly woman managed to survive. With such a rapid invasion of monsters, his grandmother most likely didn't even have a chance. Dong-gun tries to reassure the boy that his grandmother's house is already very close, so they can get to her if they work together. Ben-ho nods and is about to answer something, but doesn't have time to do so. The boys hear some noise nearby and turn around. The door is slightly open, and there is some movement happening behind it. Dong-gun instantly tenses up and takes out his baseball. The door opens fully, and the man they have been waiting for so long enters the room. "I will help you all," says Jae-hyun. "Perhaps this man can save them all. He will help them get out of this pit of despair and hopelessness." After some time, they all sit down together at a small table. Hayawan blushes and sheepishly apologizes for it being a little cramped. Dong-gun also sheepishly replies that there is nothing wrong with that, since they themselves came here without warning. The awkwardness is broken by Hyun-jun, returning from the kitchen with several plates of food on a tray. He leans over slightly and carefully places plates in front of each person sitting at the table. Hayawan is very embarrassed and isn't sure if her cooking will be to their liking at all. But the girls' fears turn out to be in vain. These people haven't seen home-cooked food for so long that it makes them incredibly excited. One of the girls freezes with chopsticks in her hand, as if she still can't believe that there is so much delicious food in front of her. This is simply amazing. She screams after the first bite of the egg roll. Haewan blushes even more and replies that she did all this only thanks to Jae-hyun, because if he had not brought the food, she would have been able to offer the guests only naked rice and tangerines. The self-satisfied recluse notes that this girl's trust reached the 50 mark even earlier than her husband did. "Thank you for the treat." Cheers of delight are heard from all sides. The superhumans can't contain their emotions, savoring every bite of the treat. Egg roll is especially popular. It is quite often served in Japanese restaurants, so it is in high demand. Haewan smiles happily as she watches the boys eat her cooking with such pleasure. Little So-yeon approaches her mother and quietly says that she wants a piece of egg roll too. Haewan pats her on the head and promises to make the egg roll again after their guests have eaten. Hearing this, one of the girls waves her hand and calls the little girl to eat with her. There is no need to repeat it twice, and a joyful So-yeon instantly finds herself on the girl's lap. It looks so cute that everyone at the table starts to quietly chuckle, while the girl picks up the most delicious piece with her chopsticks. She puts it in the baby's mouth, and So-yeon closes her eyes happily. The parents, flushed with shame, stand nearby, not knowing what to do with themselves. Jae-hyun asks them to join him for a meal, as there is enough food for everyone. "Then let's have lunch together." The couple laughs almost in unison. For a while there is silence at the table, broken only by the clatter of chopsticks on plates. Jae-hyun sadly thinks that he hasn't eaten such a delicious meal in a long time. He remembers the sweet note his mom put on his takeout container, and it makes him feel even sadder. The guy hopes that his family is okay and that they manage to survive. It doesn't take long before the plates are empty. So-yeon is already tired and asks her mother to put her to bed. Haewan smiles warmly at the children and picks up the baby, preparing to carry her to the bedroom. Jae-hyun decides that the right moment has come and suggests that everyone else finish the interrupted conversation. The recluse asks why they can't go to their grandmother, who is very close. Dong-gun immediately becomes gloomy and explains that it is all because of the goblins. Jae-hyun doesn't quite understand what the problem is and asks again. And he learns that apparently the underground parking lot is a very convenient place for monsters to hide. So the goblins decided to make it their base. According to preliminary estimates, there are at least a couple of thousand goblins in this place. The recluse ability only works up to the 30th floor, which is why the goblins can enter here through the underground levels. The superhumans saw that all the entrances to the apartments were connected to the subway, so they didn't dare go out. Jae-hyun suggests that they try other ways to do this. But he learns that a monster much more terrible and dangerous than ordinary goblins was spotted on the neighboring road. He looked like a cross between a wolf and a bear. When the superhumans encountered this monster, they were only able to escape from it thanks to a lucky coincidence. They were lucky that the monster was busy fighting a whole group of goblins. The description of this monster makes Jae-hyun think deeply. Dong-gun lowers his head guiltily, upset that they couldn't get a better look at the creature because of the darkness. The recluse, after some reflection, says that it is impossible to avoid these monsters forever. Dong-gun, however, does not share such enthusiasm and replies that they all have their limits. "Limits?" Jae-hyun asks, a little surprised. Superhumans use bows, throw baseballs, and do many other things, but sooner or later, it all just ends. After listening to them, the guy asks to show him all the inventory. He thinks he can solve this problem. Picking up the baseball, Jae-hyun places it on his list. But for some reason he can't do the same with the bow. The system demands 1.5 million won to add a compound bow in good condition to the list of items, and the guy has no choice but to agree. "Can you all use a bow?" he asks the instantly blushing superhumans. From their reaction, he understands that they do not know how to use such weapons, but he still buys 5 sets of bows and arrows at once. Even if you don't have any skills, this is a good chance to practice. Ben-ho looks at the kits lying in front of him and feels hope for saving his grandmother reappear inside him. Dong-gon is no less happy because now their hunting speed will increase significantly since they no longer have to worry about the number of arrows. But still, before finding Grandma, we need to thin out the goblin ranks as much as possible. "When will we start hunting them?" Dong-gon asks. Jae-hyun answers without hesitation that it will be tomorrow. The sooner they start, the better. If everything goes well, they will save Ben-ho's grandmother tomorrow. This statement delights the guy who has lost all hope. The more practical Dong-gun immediately asks how exactly they can do this, to which Jae-hyun replies that they will use a bait strategy. The superhumans listen carefully to the guy's proposed plan and come to certain conclusions. Perhaps this plan is not as unrealistic as they initially thought. The main thing is that they are lucky and this strategy works. Meanwhile, a notification arrives that Choi Hyun-jun has completed his task. Only now does Jae-hyun learn that he had to spend 30,000 won on this task. This means that only through the availability of money will he be able to raise the level of his citizens. There is no urgent need for this now, so you can wait a bit with the tasks. Now that Hyun-jun's trust has reached 50, the recluse can register him as a vassal. This is exactly what the guy immediately decides to do. Hyun-jun suddenly notices a flashing bluish glow around his body, but he still doesn't understand what happened. The system notifies the master that the new vassal's awakened ability is Gorilla Power. Experience and money gained from killing a monster are doubled, and the Absolute Eyes skill can now be used within a 5-meter radius of the house. Suddenly, Jae-hyun notices the button to increase the vassal's level and presses it, to which the system demands a whole million won to carry out this command, and the guy is unpleasantly shocked by this. Having recovered from the shock, he asks Mr. Choi how he feels. The man replies that he is filled with some new power and asks if this is his doing. He feels like he's at least 10 years younger. Pleased with these changes, Jae-hyun asks his newly minted vassal to also take part in the planned operation. Citizens receive 10% additional experience, and the vassal will be able to gain even more, due to the double effect. Therefore, the recluse asks Hyun-jun to try and kill as many monsters as possible. "I believe in you," he smiles joyfully at the frightened man. The next day comes, and they set out on their journey. The first thing they decide to do is check the first floor, even though it is clearly in a deplorable state. This is the first task given by Jae-hyun. The group's task today is to find all survivors and send them to a safe place on the 30th floor. In addition, they must attract and kill as many goblins as possible inside this house. They don't know what will come out of it all, but they are determined to do everything possible to complete their first task. It is unknown in which of the apartments they might encounter a goblin, so Dong-gon orders them all to be on guard. One by one, the guys go through all the apartments, starting from the 101st and further. When they enter the next one, they stop in horror. The girls cover their mouths with their palms to hold back the urge to gag. There are many mutilated corpses lying on the floor of this apartment, and this picture evokes horror and fear. Unfortunately, there is no one left to save here. "Let's get out of here," Dong-gon commands as soon as he comes to. They go into the next apartment, but there too they don't find anyone alive. On the first floor, no one had a chance of survival. Dong-gon orders to quickly go up to the second floor. But no one is waiting for them there either. The same terrifying picture appears before them as soon as they get up and go inside. Gritting his teeth in impotent rage, Dong-gon orders them to go up to the next floor. There they are greeted by an oppressive silence, but there are no corpses in sight. Dong-gon runs to the nearest door and knocks with all his might, loudly asking if there is anyone inside. No one answers, and the group moves on to the next apartment. Without losing hope, they pound their fists on each door with all their might. But no one opens the door for them, and there is not a single living soul in sight on the entire floor. When the doors run out, the superhumans realize that there is no one left for them to save here either. Dongan directs the group to the 4th floor. There they run up to each door again, shouting loudly that they are a rescue team and have come to help. Suddenly, one of the doors opens slightly. A haggard man peers out through a small crack and quietly asks if they are really from the rescue team. Dongan enthusiastically confirms this, happy that they found at least one person. A man asks for some water to wet his dry throat. Just hearing this request, Dongan immediately reaches for his backpack and unzips it. He takes out a small bottle of water and hands it to the man through the same crack in the door. Only now does the exhausted man finally understand that these people really came to save him. Dongan promises to take him to a safer place, but the man still finds it difficult to believe him. However, this may be his only chance for salvation, and it must not be missed. Therefore, the man opens the door completely, and now other people hidden behind his back become visible. He extends his hand to introduce himself and says his name is Hong Jong-soo. Dongan happily shakes his hand, saying his name in response. He then sends Ga Young and Hye-rin to take those people to the 30th floor and then return back here. Jong-soo was extremely surprised by what he heard because he thought that they were going to the 1st floor now and not the highest one. But his son looks quite pleased, for some reason confident that they sent a whole helicopter for them. To his disappointment, this is not the case, but at least in the place where they are going, they can eat hot food and take a shower. The information about the shower delights his sister, now they are ready to go anywhere. And the information that there is even hot water there completely dispels any doubts. The girl runs up to the rescue team and urges her father and brother to get up faster. Jong-soo looks at the other rescuers and suddenly realizes that he knows these guys. The rescue operation continues, and the number of citizens received has now reached 40 people. The first thing they did was to place all the children and elderly people they found in the Choi family's apartment. For now, the young people will have to stay in the corridor. The rescue team searched all floors, but was unable to find any more people. Apparently, not all residents were originally in the building. Choi Hyun-jun's apartment is almost full, but this should be enough. Jae-hyun uses his absolute vision skill to inspect the entire house. He sees a tired Ben-ho dragging furniture to help make everyone who was rescued more comfortable. The other guys keep up with him, helping as much as they can. Even girls make every effort to help the victims. Not to mention the guys who are carrying heavy loads with all their might and helping to set up the floor. After completing the inspection and making sure everything is in order, Jae-hyun returns to reality. Now that all survivors are safe, you can continue your mission. And the next stage is goblin hunting. So the rescue team comes together again to continue their mission. Dongan is going to hold a briefing. Now their main task is to lure out all the goblins hiding underground. And the guy is going to start from the -1st floor. He suggests splitting into 2 teams, provoking the creatures and cleaning them up. And then do the same with the -2nd floor. But there is a chance that there will be more goblins than they expect. Then the group might get stuck on the -1st floor, and if they also have to drag corpses, it won't be easy at all. However, now that they have such a huge number of arrows, all these prospects do not look too hopeless. But before they have time to properly discuss their next steps, a growl is heard very close by. The superhumans turn sharply at the sound. Several evil goblins are already advancing directly towards them. The monster's eyes glow red, and their sharp fangs flash dangerously even in the darkness. One of the girls immediately grabs a bow in her hands and shoots the first arrow. In a few seconds, she manages to fire several arrows, and each of them hits the goblins' heads right on. The other guy grips his bat more tightly and also rushes into the attack. One blow is enough to rip the monster's head off. There are only a few goblins, so defeating them is not particularly difficult. But immediately after, something strange starts to happen. "Look," one of the girls screams, pointing her fingers in the direction of the slain goblins in amazement. All of a sudden, their corpses begin to dissolve into thin air. Ben-ho suspects that this is one of Jae-hyun's abilities. And this ability is very useful to them. Now there is one less problem. Ben-ho can't help but smile proudly. He thought Jae-hyun had a solution from the start, and he wasn't disappointed. Meanwhile, the recluse sits in his apartment and carefully watches the pop-up notifications, rejoicing at the perfect timing. Although he had not planned it, it turned out that he was able to observe the rescue team. Suddenly, a new notification appears stating that Ben-ho has reached the required loyalty level and can now become a vassal. This is a little surprising, since only a few hours have passed since the group left. But for reasons unknown to Jae-hyun, this guy's loyalty had reached a whopping 88 points. So the recluse decides that the time has come to accept another vassal. Be that as it may, the more of them there are, the faster all citizens, including himself, will develop. Ben-ho, who is not expecting anything like this, suddenly notices a bright glow around him. And all the other superhumans also cannot help but notice such an unusual glow. This light comes in very handy, blinding the goblins and giving the humans a little respite. But very soon it turns out that everything is not so rosy. The glow also attracted other goblins who were previously unaware of the ongoing battle. The monsters clutch their blinded eyes, growling in pain and anger. Dongon understands that there are now too many goblins and they need to escape from here urgently. Obeying his order, the group quickly retreats. Having run a little to the side, they stop and fire several sharp arrows at the monsters at once. But there are so many goblins that even after losing several of their fellows at once, their total number does not visually decrease. However, despite this, no one is going to give up so easily. Arrows fly into the crowd of monsters one after another, each time hitting the target perfectly. But the Gobins pay absolutely no attention to the corpses of their fellows under their feet, easily walking forward right over the dead bodies. And it seems that their number is only increasing, no matter how hard people try. "There are too many of them!" Byung-ho screams, running as fast as he can next to Donggun. No one even imagined that they would attract such a huge crowd of these freaks. Apparently they all came up here from the -2nd floor. The only chance to escape now is the fire escape, which they managed to reach with difficulty. Now the most important thing is to close the door leading there, but the huge paws of the pressing goblins prevent this from being done. Altogether the guys rush at this door in an attempt to finally slam it shut. But the goblins don't give up either, pushing their limbs with all their might into the remaining gap between the door and the wall. Even with the combined efforts of several guys, it is impossible to close the entrance to the fire escape. "Step aside!" Suddenly Mr. Choi's loud cry is heard. Hyunjung activates his gorilla power to help everyone else. The guys obediently scatter to the sides, and Hyunjung slams the ill-fated door with just one blow. "Get out quickly!" he shouts, using all his strength to hold the monsters back at the door. The man's entire body is tense to the limit, and every muscle aches from the unbearable load. Hyunjun thinks that he must cope and save everyone else at any cost. After all, no one else can do this except him. "We're safe, come here quickly!" Donggun shouts to Mr. Choi. The exhausted man is finally able to let go of the door, which he does immediately. Hyunjun runs as fast as he can towards Donggun, who is waiting for him. But in his haste, he twists his leg and falls painfully to the floor, while behind him, the goblins are already opening the door to rush after him. Deciding that this is the end, he asks Donggon to leave him here and run away without him. The guy only has time to curse, frozen for a second in indecision. Duck-Soo comes to the rescue just in time with his baseball bat. After killing the nearest goblin with one blow, the boy extends his hand to Mr. Choi. The man tries unsuccessfully to crawl to Duck-Soo, but he is already firmly held by several pairs of goblin hands. Duck-Soo was about to rush to help again, but suddenly there was a bright flash of light and something strange happened. The guy looks in amazement at the completely empty space where Hyunjun had just been lying. The goblins realize the loss of their victim much faster than he does, and even more embittered, they rush forward. The nearest monster quickly jumps up and is about to land right on Duck-Soo. The guy manages to react in time and throws the goblin back with a powerful blow of the bat. Meanwhile, Donggun is joined by the rest of the superhumans, and they begin to shoot the goblins, giving Dong-Soo a chance to return to them. The guy runs back to the group with all his might, and several loudly growling goblins rush after him. Duck-Soo runs to the stairs, and this gives him a little more strength. Donggun is already pulling back his bowstring, ready to fire another arrow at any goblin that gets too close to his friend. "Come on!" he shouts loudly, and Gayon with him, continuing to release arrow after arrow. Duck-Soo makes a dash forward, slightly breaking away from the crowd of goblins. It's quite quiet and gloomy outside at this time, with almost black clouds floating by, sometimes blocking the moon, and then everything around becomes a little darker. Somewhere nearby, a huge brown bear with brightly glowing eyes is tearing another goblin to pieces. Blood splatters in all directions, leaving scarlet marks on the pavement. "We need more," the bear thinks, furiously biting into another monster. Suddenly hearing something, the bear turns around and looks carefully into the distance, immediately noticing the only illuminated window on the 30th floor of the nearest high-rise building. Kill at any cost. Another thought flashes through the embittered animal's mind. Hyunjun suddenly finds himself falling to the floor of the now very familiar corridor on the 30th floor, and immediately hears Jae's voice, Hina, who says that trouble almost happened. Without understanding anything, Mr. Choi raises his head and adjusts his glasses that have fallen off the bridge of his nose. Jae-hyun, meanwhile, leans down a little and extends his hand to him. The guy decided to observe the situation using his absolute eyes skill just in case, and he was right. It's good that he has the skill to summon a vassal, otherwise things could have ended much worse. But even so, Hyunjun still managed to get several injuries. The man's right leg is quite bloody, but he is confident that it is just a scratch that will heal quickly. Jae-hyun understands that he needs to stock up on a wide variety of medications. He asks Mr. Choi to wait a bit and returns to the apartment. There he finds a first aid kit and carefully examines its contents. This small box brings back memories of his childhood, where his mother treated him with medicines that weren't the most pleasant to taste. And now this first aid kit will come in handy again. The guy takes out all the contents and puts them on the table. He only has 40 slots, but he will have to order quite a lot of farming. Now this need has become obvious. And then an idea comes to his mind. There is absolutely no need for him to order each medicine separately. The pleased guy adds the entire first aid kit to the new slot. He replenishes all the used medicines and carries the first aid kit to Hyunjun. Sitting down closer to the man, he asks to let him examine his wound. Hyunjun is a little embarrassed by such concern, but still pulls up his pants leg, exposing the scratch. The first thing Jae-hyun decides to do is disinfect the wound. He soaks a small piece of cotton wool in the required solution and carefully touches the scratch. But even such a barely perceptible touch makes Hyunjun hiss in pain through his teeth. When the boy finally finishes treating the damage, Mr. Choi's trust and loyalty increases a little more. Jae-hyun hopes the rest of the guys are okay. He suggests that Hyunjun take a little rest while he finishes some work. The guy activates the absolute eyes skill again to inspect the underground floors. Now he can see that the battle with the goblins is in full swing. Thanks to the large number of arrows, the boys are still holding up well. "Doksu, run!" Donggun shouts at the top of his lungs, continuing to shoot at the goblins rushing after the boy. There were literally just a few flights of stairs left before he finally reached the rest of the boys. The goblins follow him closely, trying their best to reach their prey with their long paws topped with sharp claws. Doksu's face was flushed from the strain, and his eyes were filled with beads of salty sweat obscuring his vision. The goblins accelerate and, pushing off the ground with their powerful paws, jump into the air, almost catching up with the guy. Ben-ho, seeing this, rushes to help. He swings his bow and hits the goblins with his bow handle, killing several monsters at once. Not stopping there, the guy again rushes into the thick of the crowd of goblins. Ben-ho tirelessly kills goblin after goblin without stopping for a second. Behind him, Donggon and Duke Su, who had already reached him, exclaim in surprise. For the first time, they see Ben-ho so belligerent and angry. Jae-hyun realizes that they are doing quite well. Another notification window appears, offering to equip Ben-ho with the teleportation skill, which allows him to move through space using mental power. Apparently, registering this guy as a vassal was a very good decision. Meanwhile, Kim Gon, at the boss's request, put the extension cord they had found into combat readiness. The other guys were busy with the water tank at the time, but they also managed to do it successfully. So Donggun, after making sure that everything is done, urgently calls Ben-ho back to them. Hearing the order, the boy runs back to the group, jumping over several piles of furniture created by the group along the way. Once he reaches safety, Donggun and the others drop a water tank down. The goblins, not expecting this, freeze in their tracks in surprise, not understanding what it is. The tank explodes, and streams of cold water drench the monsters, which makes the monsters even more angry. Donggon gives a new command and his order is immediately carried out. It only takes one press of the button on the extension cord to set their plan in motion. An electric discharge, amplified by water, rushes throughout the entire room. All the goblins received a powerful electric shock, and the area around them was filled with the smell of burnt wiring and scorched flesh. Jae-hyun immediately receives numerous notifications about successfully killing goblins and the addition of experience and money to his wallet. The level of existing skills was increased and one new one was acquired. The recluse was racked with a strange pain, and purple streams of powerful energy began to spread out in all directions around him. The system notifies that hostile creatures have been detected, so Jae-hyun issues the order to destroy, and his power envelops all the goblins gathered below. Another second and the monsters are instantly torn into many small pieces. At this time, quite a few hostile goblins had gathered on the second floor. None of them managed to notice someone else's quiet steps in time. One of the goblins turns around when he notices that he has been covered by someone's huge shadow. Right behind the monster's back, a huge bear with eyes that glow brightly in the dark grows. Without waiting for the other goblins to notice the danger, he roars loudly and rushes to attack. The bear sinks its sharp fangs into the goblin's shoulder, and the sound of breaking bones is heard. The remaining goblins look in horror at the huge animal that suddenly appeared right in their midst. Having finished with the first goblin, the bear is already approaching the rest. Claws, sharp as daggers, glitter in the dim light of the second floor below. His massive body, covered in thick fur, seemed clumsy, but in fact his movements were lightning fast. Realizing that they couldn't stand alone, several goblins looked at each other and decided to act together. The bear spun around, dodging the random blows, while methodically picking off his opponents one after another. But this did not stop the goblins at all. On the contrary, they continued their attack with redoubled enthusiasm. The bear tirelessly grabbed them by the necks, threw them against the walls, and broke bones with one movement of his powerful paws. Keeping pace with him, the goblins dug their sharp teeth into the bear's flesh, tearing out fur and pieces of flesh. The goblin, clinging to the bear's scruff, acted with incredible ferocity and agility, his razor-sharp teeth, coated in dark saliva, biting into the animal's flesh again and again. The bear, seemingly gathering its last strength, let out such a deafening roar that several goblins retreated back. But almost immediately the monsters continued to fight fiercely, trying to get to the most vulnerable places, where the skin was thinner. At what point did it become obvious that the bear was losing? He could not cope with such a huge number of enemies. But suddenly, some unknown force saved him from certain death, simply blowing up all the goblins around him. The bear looked around in surprise, not understanding where the help had come from, and a system notification window informed him that citizenship had just been granted. Realizing that the danger was no longer there, the beast was finally able to relax and assume its true form. In less than a minute, the huge brown bear turned into a fragile, long-haired girl. As soon as the transformation was complete, she immediately fell to the floor, exhausted, and lost consciousness. Now Jae-hyun can also catch his breath a little. Using the absolute eye skill, he watched this fight from the very beginning. And now he looks with concern at the defenseless figure of the girl lying on the floor among many dead goblins. The system suggests that the girl's name is Oh On-ju and she is a werebear. During her transformation into a beast, all physical abilities and regeneration reach their maximum. To the recluse's surprise, On-ju was level 33 and even had an A rank ability. The latest notifications about trust increases arrive just in time, and now Jae-hyun can calmly begin registering new vassals. He accepts Kang Dok-soo, who is level 25 and has the title of Third Servant, as his vassal. His awakened ability, Steel Knight, summons a full-body steel armor and a halberd. A vassal's level depends on his awakened ability. For example, Choi Hyun-jun with his C-rank ability is level 20. And Kang Dok-soo is level 25 and has a B-rank ability. Lastly, Moon Byung-ho has an A-rank teleportation ability and is level 30. The moment Jae-hyun registers them as vassals, the level is determined based on the awakened ability. The recluse suspects that the rank is assigned randomly. If Byung-ho got rank A due to his loyalty, then Hyun-jun, with a higher loyalty score, should have gotten rank B instead of rank C. In fact, Dok-soo, with a loyalty rating of 31, received a B rank ability. Jae-hyun thinks it would be good to know under what conditions people obtain high-ranking abilities. This is an extremely important task, since he can only register a dozen vassals, and naturally, it is much more profitable to get people of a higher rank. The problem is that Jae-hyun doesn't know what exactly will happen if he accepts a person with an already awakened ability as his vassal. It is only known that people with already awakened abilities can move freely along stairs, elevators, and corridors. Jae-hyun uses the absolute eye skill again to see if that bear girl has woken up. But she still lies lifeless on the cold floor of the corridor among many dead goblins. The recluse understands that the girl herself will not be able to climb up here. Therefore, he decides to entrust this task to Hyunjun. Just then, the elevator arrives and its doors open. Jae-hyun asks Mr. Choi to bring here the woman who is currently on the -2nd floor. Meanwhile, the rest of the group carefully descends the stairs and approaches the dead goblins. Dak-soo chuckles thoughtfully when he sees the state of their corpses. Now it becomes clear to everyone that the goblins were simply torn apart by someone's influence. This makes Dong-gun think deeply. After all, if someone has an ability of this level, then they are clearly someone truly great. The guy recalls that even at the beginning of their acquaintance, Mr. Choi claimed that Jae-hyun was a very outstanding person. And it was this man who, by some miracle, was able to restore hot water to the apartments. At the time, this news had sent everyone into a frenzy of delight, but only now had he finally realized how remarkable this ability was. Moreover, even the ingredients for cooking were somehow provided by Jae-hyun. It was most likely this guy's ability that tore the goblins apart today. Dong-gun is also a little worried about the strange things happening to Ben-ho. This guy was always the quietest and most withdrawn of them all. But after meeting Kim Jae-hen became a completely different person, and such significant changes are even frightening. So, no matter what abilities this guy possesses, there is only one conclusion to be drawn from all of this. In this damned world, in order to survive, you must at all costs be chosen by this person. Even the recluse, unaware of such thoughts, was closely watching Hyunjun's every step at this time. He must make sure that everything goes as it should, and that this bear girl will soon be safe without any complications. Ju herself is now seeing a dream that is more like her worst nightmare. She had seen this dream memory many times before, but each of them brought her unbearable pain. That day, she stood very close to her son as he played with his car, but still not close enough. The girl watched the child play with a smile, not even suspecting the impending danger. The boy happily waves his hand at her, not noticing that there is someone behind him. Anju's face suddenly turns pale when she realizes what's happening. The girl opens her eyes in horror, already knowing in advance that she won't make it in time. Behind her son stand 3 huge goblins, and only a few seconds remain before the tragedy. The girl suddenly rushes forward, trying to reach the child in time. Only now does the boy finally turn around and notice the monsters leaning over him. Hiju doesn't have time to run to his son. A few seconds later, it's all over, and all that remains on the floor is the bloody car her child was playing with. At this moment, Anju suddenly wakes up, her heart beating so hard that it feels like it's about to jump out of her chest. Jae-hyun calls her name, and the girl turns her head towards the voice. The guy hesitates, not knowing how to start the conversation correctly. Hiju sits up on the bed and clutches his head. The recluse extends his hand to her and tells her his name to introduce himself. "Did you do this?" the girl answers instead of shaking hands. Jae-hyun doesn't immediately understand what she's talking about. Then Anju reminds her that the goblins she fought all had their heads torn off. Now the recluse understands what is being said and hesitantly removes the outstretched hand. "That's right," he says. Hiju looks at this guy thoughtfully. His ability was so strong that all those goblins had their heads torn off in an instant, and there were quite a few of them. She hadn't allowed herself to hope for a long time, but now she couldn't drive these thoughts away. Maybe this is the person who can help her? Jae-hyun still looks at the girl tensely, not knowing what to expect from her. "Save my son," she suddenly says. More than anything in the world, she would like to see her child at least one more time. Unable to control herself any longer, the girl once again falls into hysterics, swallowing bitter tears. Jae-hyun realizes that she lost her child to the goblins. He looks at the sobbing girl and doesn't know what to do now. Is there really no way out? He decides to contact the system, and it unexpectedly offers to catch 1,000 goblins, and as a reward for completing this task, he will receive the resurrection of Anju's son. The guy resolutely reaches out to the notification window to take this task, but to his great regret, he receives the answer that this task cannot be obtained. This means that he still doesn't have enough strength to revive a person. And then the system explains the refusal by saying that there is not enough money at the moment to complete the task, and this shocks Jae. Hina. It turns out that he can still take on such a task. This means that he can resurrect a person from the dead, and all he needs is money. It is still difficult to even imagine how much money will be needed for the resurrection. But the main thing is that it is possible. So Jae-hyun calls out to Anju, and she immediately turns to him with hope. The recluse quietly says that perhaps he can help her. This exhausted girl only needs one hope to gain strength. "Can you really resurrect my son?" Anju asks, not believing his ears. In response, she hears that it is possible, but not right now. However, there is definitely a way. Anju agrees to anything, just to get her child back. Ha-dong-gun's squad now includes Deok-soo and Byung-ho with awakened abilities, and if you add Anju with her level 33, it will become much easier to deal with most of the monsters. It's best to make all 7 of them vassals, so after making his decision, Jae-hyun asks Anju to get out of bed so he can introduce her to the other members of the group. Dong-gun is the first to extend his hand to the girl. With a polite smile, he says his name, but suddenly finds out that Anju already knows it. "You fight goblins by throwing baseballs at them, right?" she asks, and Dong-gun's eyes widen in shock. Hee-ju also knows the girl next to him, because she has seen her shoot a bow many times. Ga-yeon, not hiding her surprise, asks how this girl knows them all. In response, Anju smirks and suggestively imitates the growl of a bear. However, the group still remains perplexed and silent, not recognizing the ferocious beast in this girl. And then, Anju decides to show them clearly and smoothly flows into his second form. Gradually, her body becomes covered with fur and her figure changes its outline. And only now do the guys understand who exactly is standing in front of them. "It's that beast!" Ga-yeon screams. With a cheerful smile, Anju corrects her, explaining that she is not a bear, but a she-bear. She had already helped these guys several times, so they remembered this she-bear very well. The goblin's enemy is her friend, so the girl is confident that they will get along. Jae-hyun is glad that they actually already know each other. Now he has something to tell them all. An operation to rescue Moon Byung-ho's grandmother will be carried out tomorrow morning. The number of goblins has dwindled, and this can be used to save her. Only Hyun-jun will miss this operation as his injury is still bothering him. Ju will take part in tomorrow's operation instead of him. The girl is not at all averse to working with the group, and Jae-hyun suggests gathering early in the morning to begin the rescue operation. The boys happily agree. The recluse then turns to Deok-soo and Byung-ho, which surprises and unnerves them a little. The guy asks them to go out into the hallway for a moment, and they have no choice but to do so. Jae-hyun asks as they all leave the apartment together. From the guys' faces, he immediately understands that they don't even have a clue. However, after a minute of silence, they begin to understand what this might be connected with. Is it our strength? Ben-ho is the first to guess. Jae-hyun confirms with a smile that his guess is correct. He says that this time they both woke up. Ben-ho gained the ability to teleport, and Deok-soo received an ability called Steel Knight. Before tomorrow's operation, we need to find out what these two are now capable of. So Jae-hyun turns to the system to give the boys a task. He is offered a group task to demonstrate his awakened abilities, the penalty for failure of which will be spending the night in the corridor, and the reward will be increased strength. Jae-hyun decides to take advantage of this offer and issues a task. He is distracted by an impatient Deok-soo, who is eager to know what exactly his new ability is. The recluse explains that the boy can now summon steel armor and a halberd. Before Deok-soo could process this information, Ben-ho, who was standing next to him, suddenly disappeared. The guy cries out indignantly, immediately beginning to envy such a cool ability. Together with Jae-hyun, they look around in search of Ben-ho, who has disappeared from sight. A few seconds later, the missing young man appears next to them out of nowhere. It worked! The guy cries out with delight. He can already imagine how much he can do now, having such a wonderful ability. Ben-ho's trust soars and he bows low to the recluse, expressing his gratitude. However, Jae-hyun will have to upset him a little. He tells the instantly saddened boy that right now, he won't be able to go to his grandmother using this ability. At this point, there is no guarantee that he will be able to master the new skill without consequences. Perhaps he was just lucky to teleport so successfully this time, but next time, this might not happen. The first thing to do is figure out what the maximum distance he can move is, and what the penalty will be for using this ability. They are distracted from their conversation by noise coming from Deok-soo. The guy, having seen Ben-ho with his cool ability, decided to try using his own. "Did it work?" he shouts, looking with delight at his body, encased in beautiful armor. Jae-hyun, ignoring the cheerful guy, calls out to Ben-ho. The recluse asks the guy to try to teleport to the window of the house across the street. Ben-ho doesn't yet fully understand how to use the new skill correctly, but nevertheless, he agrees to try. Then Jae-hyun creates a new task for the guy to get his reward. Focusing, Ben-ho carefully calls upon his powers. In a split second, he dissolves into thin air, and the place where he had just stood appears empty. The guy himself, as planned, ends up on the top floor of the house opposite. It worked. He cries out joyfully when he realizes exactly where he is. Jae, who is looking at him, Hyunwoo and Duksoo were practically jumping for joy. The system counts the task as completed, and the recluse breathes a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Ben-ho continues to wave his arms, but for some reason his movements begin to slow down. And eventually, the guy's eyes roll back and he loses consciousness. Jae-hyun and Duksoo watch in horror as he falls. Before it is too late, the recluse calls his vassal to him. To his delight, the summoning is successful, and Ben-ho's body appears right in front of them. The guys carry the victim back to the room and lay him on the bed. Apparently, the movement requires a lot of endurance, since he lost consciousness. Luckily, he'll be fine. We just need to give him some rest. "Do you by any chance play sports?" the recluse suddenly asks Duksoo. Having heard a positive answer, he gives the young man an assignment. It's an armor workout where Duksoo must do exactly 100 push-ups and squats. The guy has only 10 minutes to complete this task, during which he must complete it. The reward for completing the task will be increased strength, and in case of failure, he will have to sleep in the open air. Since Duksoo is a student of the physical education department and has incredible endurance, he was more than successful in completing the task, although it required a lot of effort. Jae-hyun turns his gaze to the system window, where the assessment of this task is currently taking place. This has never happened before, and it causes a little tension in the guy. "Now can we finish?" Duksoo distracts him from contemplating the window. Having come to his senses, the recluse allows the boy to go and rest a little. Meanwhile, the system completes the evaluation and shows that the task was successfully completed. Also, the strength has been increased slightly. Jae-hyun looks at his hands, enveloped in glowing energy, in surprise, and realizes that this is precisely his power. He didn't expect at all that thanks to the task completed by Duksoo, his own powers would increase. This changes the situation completely. The next morning, as agreed, the rescue team begins the operation and almost immediately runs into a crowd of goblins. "Run!" Dongan shouts to the boys, but they don't need this order. They're already running away as fast as they can. An angry Duksoo looks back at the crowd of monsters and decides to try out his new abilities. When the boy's figure is enveloped in a bright light, the goblins stop hesitantly. In place of the practically unarmed guy, a knight in armor suddenly appears, and he no longer seems such easy prey to them. Using his halberd, Duksoo easily cuts off the limbs of the goblin closest to him. With the next few precise movements, he reaches the rest of the gaping monsters. Having lost several of their brothers at once, the frightened goblins rush to flee. With a warlike cry, Duksoo swings his halberd again, loudly cursing at the cowardly fleeing monsters. But the monsters don't manage to escape. Each of them is struck by an arrow straight to the head. Duksoo lets out a surprised cry when he notices this. Ben-ho suddenly appears right in front of him and asks him not to worry about the fleeing goblins, because he will take care of them himself. This news makes Duksoo even more enthusiastic. With renewed vigor, he rushes into the attack again. But the remaining goblins, having already realized the hopelessness of their situation, turn around and quickly leave the scene of the battle. But even there, an unpleasant surprise awaits them. A huge brown bear appears right in front of the surprised monsters. The monsters understand that their end has come. Now the goblins can't escape, so Ben-ho and Deok-soo run up to the bear, happily helping her deal with the rest of the monsters. The beast cuts off heads with one blow of its paw, and splashes of bright scarlet blood fly in all directions. "Ben-ho, right now," Donggun suddenly shouts. At first, the guy doesn't understand what the boss wants from him. Then Donggun shouts at him again, ordering him to go get his grandmother immediately. He doesn't need to be told twice, and having received permission, Ben-ho is already rushing to the right house. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun watches the exciting spectacle of monsters being slaughtered with the help of the absolute eyes. Onju completed the task given to her, and the system credited more than 130,000 won to the recluse's account. In the case of the task for Doksu, the reward was an increase in strength, not money. This means that rewards are awarded randomly in such tasks. Ben-ho also completed all the possible quests for today, and now the system is slowly loading the reward for this work. Unexpectedly, the reward turns out to be some kind of jackpot. This has never happened before, so Jae-hyun is quite surprised. In addition to the unknown jackpot, he also receives skill points, which makes him even happier. Meanwhile, Ben-ho runs as fast as he can towards his grandmother's house. He teleports several times to get there faster, and this takes away a decent amount of his strength. Finally, he reaches the house he needs. There are no traces of monsters nearby, and this gives hope that everything might still be okay with the grandmother. Ben-ho runs into the house and loudly calls for his grandmother. To his wild joy, he finds her alive and well, lying in her bed. The guy immediately runs closer and falls on his knees next to her to feel her pulse. The grandmother tries to say something, but the exhausted woman doesn't even have the strength for that. But still, she immediately recognizes her grandson and quietly whispers his name. This makes Ben-ho cry loudly with joy and relief that she is okay. Although he did not lose hope until the last moment, he was still very afraid to enter this house and not find her alive. The grandmother, with the last of her strength, sits up on the bed, and the guy hugs her tightly, continuing to burst into tears. It seems to him that he walked here for too long, but the main thing is that he finally made it. And it's only thanks to Jae-hyun. The surprised recluse at that moment receives a notification that Ben-ho's loyalty and trust have reached 100 units, and he is now registered as a vassal. A vassal management board opens in front of him, and next to each person there is a plus sign to raise his level. Jae-hyun experimentally reaches his finger towards the plus sign next to Byung-ho to try out the feature. But nothing works because leveling up this guy costs a whole 100 million won, which is not in the wallet right now. The frustrated recluse realizes that he will now have to give his vassals quests every day to help them level up. And then suddenly the guy hears the sound of the elevator arriving. Since he's not expecting anyone yet, the guy activates his absolute vision skill again. Now he sees a guy and a girl who have come up to his floor. Their faces are unfamiliar to him, he has never met or seen them anywhere before. The two knock on the Choi family's door, and Hae-won immediately gets a little scared. "Who's there?" the girl asks and opens the door. The stranger in front of her, rubbing the back of her head in embarrassment, introduces herself as Kim Da-bin. There is a guy standing next to her with a box on his shoulder. His name is Min-ho, and he is her younger brother. According to Da-bin, they live in apartment number 1701, and they came here because they have one request. Hae-won raises her eyebrows in surprise, asking what kind of request this is. Da-bin blushes even more, but still makes up her mind and quickly voices her request out loud. She knows it sounds very impudent, but she would still like to ask to take a shower at least once in their apartment. Hae-won's mouth drops open in surprise, as she had expected the request to be much more serious. "Just in case," she asks again, and Da-bin, blushing embarrassedly, asks again for permission to wash. No less embarrassed, Hae-won opens the door wider, inviting the boys to come in and use the shower. "Where should I put the box?" Min-ho asks. "This box contains a variety of canned goods." Min-ho opens it, and Hae-won looks at the neat rows of neatly stacked jars with admiration. "How can you avoid gifts when you show up at someone else's house with strange requests?" Da-bin laughs, still embarrassed. The bats, bows, and arrows neatly stacked in the corner. She asks in surprise who owns all these weapons. Hae-won replies that it's a long story, but the guns don't belong to the residents of this house. At this point, Jae-hyun decides to stop his observation. These guys definitely don't look like bad people. So he decides to see them sometime later and talk. Moreover, together they can try to save people from another high-rise building. Suddenly, a notification appears in front of the guy that a red tiger was caught, for which he was awarded quite a lot of experience and 39 million won. And also, another new skill was acquired. Jae-hyun realizes that he missed a lot, and again, using his absolute vision, he returns to the guys from the rescue team. He sees tired, bloody people, a defeated tiger and a bear lying lifelessly nearby. What could have happened there? The recluse thinks tensely. The system informs the guy that creatures have been discovered that meet the requirements for obtaining citizen status. Without hesitation, Jaehyun grants citizenship to all the remaining survivors. Now, the number of its citizens has reached 50. The experience points and money they earn have increased by 100%, and the skill Power of Trust has also appeared. He looks back and sees Ben-ho, who, without sparing himself, rushes forward with his grandmother in his arms. Everyone else runs after him, but the rather tired Doksu carries the bloody Onju on his shoulders. Jaehyun realizes that the girl is seriously injured. Right in front of the running boys, a new group of angry goblins suddenly appears. Hyrin and Kim Gon, who are slightly behind the others, raise their bows and begin shooting. To their great surprise, each of their arrows kills any goblin on the first hit. The other guys also notice that their bodies suddenly become very light and their breathing evens out. Jaehyun realizes that it's because of the new skill Power of Trust that increases all abilities by a value equal to the trust of each member of the group. Almost everyone in Dongun's squad has a trust level of 50 or higher, and now all of their abilities, such as endurance, vision, muscle strength, reaction, and others, have increased by at least 50%. Ben-ho is the first to realize that it's all about Jae's strength. Hina. Now the loyalty of Kim Ga-yeon and Yoo Hee-rin has also increased to the required values, and Jaehyun immediately registers them as vassals. The surprised girls notice a bright blue glow around them and do not understand what is happening. Ga-yeon receives the title of Fourth Servant and the awakened ability, Piercing Shot. With renewed strength, the girl pulls the bowstring and begins to attack. She fires just one shot, and the arrow hits its target, taking off the head of the first goblin. But then something strange happens, because the arrow continues its flight and immediately catches up with the rest of the goblins, hitting each of them in turn. This skill is called Piercing Shot, and it consumes mental resources to fire an arrow that pierces the target. Jaehyun gives the girl a new task: kill 10 goblins using this skill in 10 minutes. He thinks this ability is quite controversial. Hyrin also gained a B-rank ability called Poison Mist, which also consumes mental resources to release a mist of deadly poison. If used incorrectly, this ability can harm squad members, and Jaehyun decides to study it further a little later. Now, he intends to get to know the residents below. The recluse uses his Absolute Eye skill again to see what these people are doing. He sees a guy walking somewhere with a small bottle in his hands. Jaehyun realizes that they took drinking water in advance, which is very reasonable. It is for this reason that they have no need to join Dongon's squad. These people successfully stocked up on food and water. Suddenly, Jaehyun notices a girl lying motionless on the floor. Only after realizing who she is does he immediately rush to help. This girl's name is Kim Da-jung, and her awakened ability is healing. Jaehyun shouts joyfully, continuing to run. Finally, the guy runs to the apartment he needs. A little hesitantly, he opens the door and looks inside. The door is locked with a latch from the inside, so Jaehyun can't get into the apartment. He remembers his new skill very well. This is the invisible hand of the absolute recluse of the first level. With this skill, you can summon an invisible hand and control it for your own purposes. By concentrating, the recluse activates the desired skill. Obeying the will of the owner, the invisible hand takes the form of huge nippers. The guy immediately pushes them through the door crack and places a latch between the blades. One effort and an invisible hand breaks the bolt in half. Jaehyun immediately opens the door all the way and rushes into the room. He runs up to the girl lying motionless on the floor and kneels down next to her. "Come to your senses," he tries to shake the healer awake. Apparently, this girl is even worse off than he initially thought. Judging by her appearance and dry lips, it looks like she's severely dehydrated. Panicked, Jaehyun looks around for something that might help, and his gaze immediately catches something strange. A few steps away from the girl, there is an almost full bottle of water. Jaehyun is determined to save her no matter what. To do this, he decides to use the system again. He gives the girl a task, to take one breath, and she does it, for which she immediately receives a cure for dehydration as a reward. She gradually comes to her senses and opens her eyes, but the silhouettes still seem a little blurry to her. "Who are you?" the girl whispers quietly. Jaehyun replies that he is her upstairs neighbor and has come to help. He thought she was in critical condition, so he broke the lock and came in. Suddenly the girl starts crying loudly. She covers her face with her hands and her shoulders shake with strong sobs. Jae-hyun looks at her in confusion, not understanding the reason for such behavior. But he still abruptly interrupts her hysteria with a request for help. He tells Da-jon that his friend is badly injured and needs medical attention. The girl looks at him in bewilderment, not knowing how she can help. What is this guy even talking about, she thinks. She thinks it's complete nonsense that he thinks she has the power to help anyone. What surprises her even more is that this guy apparently knows that she is a nurse and can treat people. But since he asks for help, he probably doesn't pose any danger, so the girl decides to find out more about this man and agrees to help. Jae-hyun immediately creates a new quest that requires using healing power to cure Onju. He turns to Da-jong again and asks her to rest and eat while he brings someone who needs treatment here. At first, the girl doesn't understand what kind of food they're talking about. But then Jae-hyun uses the system again to get some tangerines. "Stop!" screams a frightened Da-jon. She asks to explain what this is and where all these tangerines come from. But Jae-hyun just smiles in response and promises to explain everything, but a little later. The girl is very weak now, so the first thing she needs to do is rest. Still a little scared and tense, Da-jon nevertheless listens and cautiously picks up the nearest tangerine. She is sure that she is just dreaming all this. Jae-hyun leaves her apartment and heads back to his own. Very soon a new notification arrives that the healer's trust has increased slightly. The guy still can't believe that everything happened so suddenly. The guys from Dongon's squad should already be here, but for some reason they are still nowhere to be seen. He looks out into the street and his eyes immediately widen in surprise. He sees a huge red tiger very close to his house. The beast chases the tired and wounded guys from the squad. Jae-hyun can't believe his eyes. He didn't expect to see another red tiger so soon. This beast is simply enormous. Its bright yellow eyes and sharp fangs inspire terror and fear. Jae-hyun can't help but be surprised as he looks at the monster closely. He thought that the most difficult part of this operation was already behind him, but he was very much mistaken. The red tiger is almost catching up with Dongon's squad. Suddenly, Hai-rin twists her ankle and falls right in front of the monster. Donggun and the others turn around when they hear her pained cry. The girl tries to get up, but she no longer has the strength or time to do so. "No!" Ga-yeon screams in fright. Rin, who had somehow gotten up, a huge red tiger had already opened its fanged mouth. The girl clenches her teeth and turns around, realizing that she doesn't have time to escape. The tiger roars loudly and almost touches her body with his fangs. However, when he finally bites and clamps his jaws, there is no one between them. In the place where the girl stood, only a reflection of alien energy remained, and the tiger looked around in bewilderment. Hai-rin herself suddenly finds herself on the floor of Jae's apartment, Hana. He himself stands opposite her, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. This girl was on edge today. Thanks to the fact that Jae-hyun literally pulled her out of the tiger's jaws, the guys got a small head start. Now they have a better chance of escaping from this red tiger. Suddenly, Ben-ho teleports right in the middle of the room with his grandmother in his arms. He asks to take care of her and is going to go back to help the rest of the squad. But Jae-hyun asks him not to do this and to wait a little. Ben-ho finds it difficult to obey him, but the recluse looks very confident. Therefore, the guy still does not dare to disobey him and remains in place. Meanwhile, the red tiger continues to chase the rapidly fleeing detachment. Jae-hyun activates his invisible hand skill in hopes of helping them. He must catch this red tiger at any cost. Donggon, who is not yet aware of these plans, suddenly stops abruptly. He understands that they all cannot be saved, so he decides to at least delay the monster for a little while to give the others a chance. With a good swing, he throws a baseball at the tiger. But this does not cause any visible harm to the monster. The tiger only becomes even more angry, and his ferocious growl is heard throughout the area. Ga-yeon turns around at the sound of this roar and immediately understands what their boss is up to. But it's too late, and she doesn't have time to help him. Donggun looks at the raging beast and clearly realizes that the end is near. "Run!" he shouts to the others, and then rushes in the opposite direction from the squad. He runs forward as quickly as possible, leading the tiger behind him. He himself will definitely not be saved, but now at least his squad will be safe. The tiger roars loudly again, almost catching up with the weakened man. Its mouth is wide open so that rows of razor-sharp teeth are clearly visible. Dongon turns around and looks in horror at the huge fangs of the monster right behind him. The guy clenches his teeth, preparing for the worst. An unexpected salvation comes in the form of Jay's invisible hand, Henna, who again took the form required by her master. The tiger tries to resist, but this time the enemy is stronger than him. An invisible hand wraps itself around the monster's neck, restricting its movements and preventing it from breathing normally. Dongon's squad, who never escaped to safety, looks at this picture in amazement. A sign with a task appears in front of Ga-yeon and the girl freezes in surprise. Jae-hyun thinks that he doesn't have to act on his own. If Ga-yeon accepts the task and goes hunting right now, the size of the catch will increase fourfold. And the girl lives up to all his expectations. The tiger, caught in a trap by an invisible hand, can't even escape when Ga-yeon approaches him. The girl looks with hatred at the monster that just almost ate their boss. Without a second's hesitation, she draws the string of her bow and releases the arrow. The superhuman's trust has risen again, and now the recluse happily registers Dongon as his vassal. As soon as the guys go up to the apartment, Jae-hyun asks the healer to help the wounded Onju. Frowning with tension, Dajon carefully heals the victim's wounds. Little by little, the bear girl begins to come to her senses. Jae-hyun is glad that he was so lucky to meet a healer. Now, he would really like to know where the other red tiger came from. Dong-gun thinks that Ben-ho's grandmother's house was in the red tiger's territory, which is why there are so many of them there. They managed to kill one, but it turned out there were more there. If you think about it, there wasn't a single goblin near the house, and if even these creatures were hiding from the tigers, then the grandmother herself was in great danger. Luckily, the squad only entered the territory of 2 tigers. It was lucky that there weren't several times more of them there, otherwise they would have been doomed. By the end of the conversation, the healer is just finishing her work. "Can I go home now?" she asks as soon as the healing is complete. Jae-hyun is planning to continue holding gatherings at his house. Now is not the best time for such a conversation, but this issue worries him very much. The recluse is silent for a few seconds, looking closely at the nervous Mr. Choi. This awkward situation embarrasses absolutely everyone in this room except him. In the end, Jae-hyun suggests that the squad move into apartment number 2901 since it is empty. The guy then turns to Kim Da-bin. There are 2 more empty apartments on the 21st floor, and he suggests that the other survivors shower and do their other needs there, while he makes sure there is electricity. The girl and her brother nod shyly, promising to pass this order on to everyone else. Seeing their sad faces, Jae-hyun allows them to move into one of these apartments and leaves the second one available for everyone else. In return, he will have a small request for them. He would very much like these 2 to continue to be messengers between himself and the other surviving people. Da-bin is surprised by such a request, but agrees to anything for the sake of her own home. Jae-hyun asks her to tell the others that whoever kills 100 goblins first will receive their own home, where there will be unlimited electricity, water, gas, and even food. If there are 10 survivors from each generation, then they will all receive equal treatment. However, how long it takes will depend on the floor they are on. From now on, Jae-hyun begins to pay fairly only those who prove their worth. The recluse creates a new task, and very soon the surviving residents begin to try to complete it. A whole crowd of goblins, growling furiously, are trying to catch up with one single boy. The guy curses loudly, running away from the enraged monsters as fast as he can. He only had a short distance left to run to a safe place. One of the goblins manages to grab the boy by the shoulder and pull him towards himself. Unable to stay on his feet, the guy falls and hits the floor painfully. "Right now!" He suddenly screams at the top of his lungs. After his shout, several guys armed with spears appear from behind the doors. With unprecedented enthusiasm, they pounce on the crowd of goblins, killing one after another. There really are a lot of monsters this time. But still, even with such a crowd of monsters, they are able to deal with them. The boys work tirelessly with their spears, piercing the angrily screaming creatures right through. Very soon, only a few wounded goblins remain from the entire crowd. Realizing that they cannot cope, the monsters begin to scatter in different directions. "Should I show you something interesting?" one of the guys suddenly asks the others. He adjusts his grip on the spear and stands still, focused, taking aim. With a loud cry, the boy throws the weapon forward, and it flies past his stunned friends like a bright arrow. Despite the fact that the goblins had already managed to run quite far, the spear still caught up with one of them. The blow hits the monster right in the chest, and the spear pierces it right through. "Did you see it?" the guy asks proudly. During today's hunt, the two killed almost 50 goblins. If you add the guy's own results to this number, the total is already more than 100. Son of Yeop Hyun, there were at least 15 of those goblins. The boy who served as bait screamed angrily. Nobody can figure out what he doesn't like this time. It doesn't matter how many creatures he brings in at once, because the results are more than good, and very soon, they will all have a new home. "I almost died because of you." The boy continues to be indignant, despite all the arguments. These loud cries make Ephenna has a headache. Angered, he reminds that the boy himself came up with the idea of hunting this way. He was confident that he could escape quickly, so he suggested it. Yep, Hyun suggests that the boy leave the team if he is not satisfied with something. The other guys immediately rush to calm him down, convincing him that Seungmin also showed himself well today, and ran as fast as none of them could. Yeop Hyun doesn't argue with his achievements, but he can't stand the fact that the guy so brazenly attacked him and demands an apology. Terrified by the prospect of being kicked off the team, Seungmin looks down guiltily and apologizes. At this point, the conflict is resolved and the squad is about to ascend to the 21st floor to get their new home. However, a huge disappointment awaits them there in the form of Dabin. The girl awkwardly apologizes and explains that there is already a team that won the main prize before them. Yeop Hyun can't believe that there was a team that killed 100 of the creatures faster than them. So the guy decides it's a stupid joke. But to his great disappointment, Dabin wasn't joking at all. And it is at this very moment that the very team that completed the task first arrives. Yeop Hyun can't believe his eyes when he sees what kind of team this is. It consists of Dabin's brother and 2 other older people. Minho says that they already went and looked at the new house, but they didn't like it, so they refused it. But in exchange, the gentleman will install electricity and water in his and Jiho's apartments. In addition, Jae-hyun will free Jiho's daughters from completing tasks. Dabin thought that the daughters of this couple were still just children, but she was wrong, and the girls are already adults. It's just that their faces look rather childish and cute. The elderly couple are overly concerned about them, even though the girls are probably better with a bow and arrow than they are. Even though they won the competition, Minho and the pair will continue to hunt goblins in the area at Mr. J's request. Hina, Chinain en as mal na kansa rains. At this point, Yonghyun finally recovers from the shock. The guy shouts loudly that this is all unfair and that Minho and the others are interested parties. Only now, remembering about Yonghoon's team, Brother Dabin says that the master asked to send this team to the 30th floor and give them the same prizes as the teams in 2nd and 3rd place. Dabin is glad that everything was resolved this way and no one will be left offended. She suggests that Yonghyun and his squad actually go up to the 30th floor since they are already expected there. The team finally agrees and they head upstairs, a little nervous about the upcoming meeting with the gentleman everyone speaks of with such admiration and respect. What kind of god is he? Probably just a cult leader. The rest of the squad begins to mock the unknown gentleman. Seungmin interrupts them, because it should be obvious that one shouldn't speak like that about a man with such abilities on his own territory. "Aren't you the one who's going to meet him now?" he says tensely to the guys. Yep, Hyun turns towards him with displeasure. "Puppy," the boy swears. Finally, the elevator they were riding on rises to the desired floor. Jae-hyun immediately approaches them, and his figure radiates such a powerful force that the Ep squad involuntarily Hina goes quiet. The recluse smiles politely at the newcomers and states his name. Yep, Hyun and everyone else freeze at first, looking hesitantly at the gentleman they have heard so much about. But in the end, Yep Hyun takes a step forward and extends his hand to introduce himself. Jae-hyun said he had a lot of fun watching their team perform, especially the use of barricades. Yep, Hyun looks at his master with fear, at a loss to understand how he was able to know such precise details of their battles. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun says he'll get to work right now connecting electricity, water, and gas to 2 nearby apartments. Yep, Hyun still can't believe it. Jae-hyun says he's doing this because they passed the selection by killing 100 goblins. "And I'm not a cult leader," the recluse continues, grinning cheerfully. He watches with grim satisfaction as the faces of the boys in this squad stretch out in shock and shame. Their flushed cheeks and guiltily lowered eyes completely satisfy the recluse. Now he has one small request for these guys. Now they themselves all together, and not just Sun Min, will serve as bait for the goblins. Dongon's squad could really use some help like this. Yep, Hyun shouts at the top of his lungs, leading the goblins to the right place. Dongun smiles in anticipation. He activated a new ability, and now he can't wait to try it out. This is a B rank ability that allows you to throw objects using your mind, increasing your attack power by exactly 5 times. When physical strength is expended during the throw, sword energy temporarily appears at the tip of the spear. Dongon has the title of Knight, which allows him to receive triple experience and money for killing monsters. So now the guy stands calmly, waiting for the nearest goblin to run closer. As soon as the monster reaches him and swings its huge clawed palm, he activates the skill. Using the power of his mind, Dongon throws the spear without using his hands at all. A weapon, quite small compared to the monster, is thrust straight into the goblin's forehead. Gayon, behind Dongun's back, keeps up with his boss, tirelessly killing goblins just as tirelessly. The goblin, who was hit right in the forehead by a spear, falls as a huge dead carcass at Dongon's feet, and the guy takes out his weapon again. The next spear, this time thrown by hand, also hits the target accurately. The last monster has been killed, and now the task of destroying 100 goblins is complete. When the monsters were dealt with, a whole and unharmed family of 3 was discovered nearby. Dongun and the rest of the guys take these people with them to bring them to Yahello. Therefore, the recluse very soon receives another notification about the discovery of creatures that meet the requirements for citizenship. Along with these 3, Yahello already has 200 citizens. After granting citizenship to Im Dong-woo, Song Sai-byul, and Im Hyun-sung, the tax collection skill was unlocked. This skill collects 10% of the money from all citizens, and at the same time the amount of cash people have does not decrease. The recharge time is 30 days, so Jae-hyun will have to wait quite a long time before he can raise the amount needed to save his parents. He needs to send Ha Dong-gun's team to the Nambumin area as quickly as possible. So the recluse decides to distribute his finances and unexpectedly increases his own level to 10. The surprised guy receives a grant of 1 billion won, and the construction function is immediately activated. Now he becomes the absolute recluse of this entire apartment building. The amazed guy begins to look at the list of construction sites provided by the system. The information comes as an unpleasant surprise, as it turns out that, for example, it will take about 5 years for the construction of solar panels to pay for itself. Therefore, the first thing the recluse decides to do is to raise Dongon's level. And then he remembers the grant he recently received worth 1 billion won. The guy learns that this money can only be spent on construction, and this amount does not include the money in his account. Jae-hyun decides that he can't help but spend it all. That's why he's determined to install solar panels. A new store window appears in the system, and the recluse decides to see what it is. This room, which works in conjunction with the absolute recluse skill, allows you to sell absolutely all registered items there. It is a system that creates objects in reality the moment a person pays for a purchase through a translucent window. All this time, the production of humanitarian aid and its delivery will also work. And with such a store, citizens will be able to buy everything they need themselves. And Jae-hyun himself will be able to install some things. In this case, the recluse decides to increase the amount of payments for everyone. The system asks where the store should be installed, and Jae-hyun chooses number 101st. Then the guy decides to install a gym as well. There, citizens will be able to increase their strength and endurance. Training in this place will be 200% more effective. A notification appears about the addition of a product listing feature, and the guy decides to immediately check out what it is. He clicks on the water tab and a whole list opens. The surprised guy quickly runs his eyes over the list of various types of water and is quite satisfied. This significantly increases the choice. He decides to look at the rest of the goods and is also completely delighted. Meanwhile, Dongon's squad is hunting goblins again. Doksu wields his halberd with vigor, enjoying his new skill. The guy finishes with the goblins pretty quickly and tiredly wipes the sweat from his forehead. Dongon suddenly asks, what will happen to the weapon if you just pick it up and throw it away? He asks the guy to give him the halberd for a while, and he doesn't have time to object. Dongon carefully picks up the weapon, which still emits a bright blue glow. He takes a good swing before throwing the halberd forward. Behind him, Doksu clutches his head when he sees how he handles his weapon. "What should I do now?" he shouts at his boss in panic. To which Dongon asks him to try to summon the halberd back. Doksu's mouth drops open in amazement at such a wonderful idea. He reaches forward and tries to call the weapon back. To his great shock and surprise, the halberd actually appears in his hand within a moment. "Dongun, are you a genius?" Deoksu cries out excitedly. Ga-yeon runs up to the guys and shouts that they need to get out of here immediately. The girl ran out of arrows and is now practically defenseless. Suddenly, a new set materializes right in front of her. A delighted Ga-yeon picks up the set of arrows and immediately begins to use them. Now their task is completed, and Jae-hyun learns that he can increase his own abilities with the rewards from completed tasks. Now he has at least some hope. It's about 10 kilometers from here to his parents' house. You can get there on foot in about 3 hours. The guy climbs onto the roof and sadly looks at what the once beautiful city has become. Now before his eyes there are only ruins. Jae-hyun understands that he needs to hurry, otherwise his parents may not wait for him. Should he start with Dongon's team? The guy ponders and decides to scroll through the information about all the squad members again. Kim Gon is level 22 with the awakened ability Crow's Mission. Anju with her second form in the form of a bear, and Da Jung, a talented healer. However, unlike Da Jung, who is already registered as a vassal, Anju still lacks loyalty. Of course, people with awakened abilities are initially more effective. But for now, there is no other way to make Anju his vassal other than resurrecting the child. Therefore, first you need to increase the difficulty level of the task. Jae-hyun is trying to create a quest to kill a monster above level 40, since the reward for such a monster is likely to be higher. But he also does not have enough resources to create such a task. The recluse suspected that this was impossible, but he could not help but try. A new notification about the destruction of an orc arrives, and this gives him an interesting thought. Jae-hyun decides to create a group quest, and this time he succeeds in setting a reward in the form of resurrecting a child. Now he needs to make sure that Anju is really on his side. So the guy goes back to the 30th floor. Ju immediately attacks him. The girl was in such a hurry that she ran with all her might, and now she can't catch her breath properly. She has already seen the reward for this task, and tears of sincere gratitude are flowing from the girl's eyes. Jae-hyun hopes that they will be able to complete this task even despite the time limit. In a fit of emotion, Anju falls to the floor again, still sobbing. "Thank you," she whispers quietly. More than anything in the world, she wants to spend at least one more day with her son. Now Anju's loyalty has increased significantly, and Jae-hyun can register her as a vassal. The guy enters one of the apartments promised to the teams, and begins to prepare it for habitation. He only needs a little effort to get electricity and hot water. The guy has already gotten used to the fact that all these actions are easy and simple. Thanks to this, Jae-hyun sometimes even feels like some kind of great wizard. He then asks the system to calculate the store's sales for that day, and finds out that more than 300,000 won have been credited to his account today. The guy once again uses his absolute eyes to see what is happening in the store. And what he sees there he really doesn't like. Jae-hyun didn't think the payments would spoil his mood so much. Conflicts are increasingly breaking out among residents. After a space called The Store was created on the first floor of the house, everything changed dramatically. The pennies awarded for killing goblins began to stimulate the desire to hunt. Now citizens have to go outside their homes to kill at least a few goblins and get a reward. The level increase is currently proceeding according to plan, and the number of new citizens has increased significantly. The figures will certainly grow exponentially in the future. Jae-hyun shifts his observation to Anju. Full of enthusiasm, the girl does not spare herself at all, tearing apart one goblin after another. The news of the possibility of her son's return gave her a tremendous amount of strength. Now Hee-ju will do everything in her power to complete the task given to her group. Having finished with the monsters, the girl smoothly transitions into human form. The fur on her body is rapidly disappearing and her body is changing shape. When the transformation is over, she lets out a tired sigh. The rest of the squad members are worried about her well-being, but the girl assures them that everything is fine. She has her own reasons for trying so hard without sparing herself. Jae-hyun knew he did the right thing by bringing Anju and Da Jung together, and now he sees that they get along quite well. It was an obvious outcome, judging by their characteristics. Meanwhile, the girls noticed the approach of something more terrible than an ordinary goblin. They peered intently into the darkness, from which they heard someone's heavy, threatening growl. Another monster approaches them with slow, confident steps. But this time, it won't be easy for anyone. The girls stare intently at the creature, which exudes a heavy, oppressive aura of danger. He's not like the monsters they've encountered before. Onjun is the quickest to come to his senses and once again transitions into his fighting form. A moment later, a huge brown bear stands in front of the monster. Wasting no time, Onjun immediately rushes into attack. The monster manages to put his weapon forward to avoid this blow. The bear tries to break through the huge long spear, but the monster does not allow her to do so. Ga Yan joins the fight and draws his bow, preparing to use his new skill as well. She releases the arrow, and it flies towards the monster, cutting through the air with a whistle. The girl is confident in the success of her shot, because last time using this skill, she managed to kill several huge goblins at once. However, today she is in for a big disappointment. The monster easily deflects the arrow fired at him with his spear, but the she-bear takes advantage of this hesitation, and with a growl, rushes straight at him again.